On June 24, 1973, 32 people died of fire or smoke inhalation as a result of an arson attack on the Upstairs Lounge, a gay bar in New Orleans, Louisiana. Several men were assaulted on July 5, 1978 by a gang of youths armed with baseball bats and tree branches in an area of Central Park in New York City known to be frequented by homosexuals. The victims were assaulted at random, but the assailants later confessed that they had deliberately set out to the park to attack homosexuals. One of those injured was former figure skater Dick Button, who was assaulted while watching a fireworks display in the park. Harvey Milk, the openly gay San Francisco city supervisor, along with Mayor George Moscone, were assassinated on November 27, 1978 by political rival Dan White at San Francisco City Hall. Outrage over the assassinations and the short sentence given to White, 7 years, prompted the White Night Riots. In March 1979, an assault on 7 women in San Francisco lesbian bar by off-duty police officers drew national attention to the strained relationship between police and the LGBT San Franciscans at the time. One woman was hospitalized for 10 days with skull injuries. Tennessee Williams was a victim of an assault in January 1979 in Key West, being beaten by 5 teenage boys. He escaped serious injury. The episode was part of a spate of anti-gay violence inspired by anti-gay newspaper ad run by a local Baptist minister. Stephen Charles, 17, of Newark, was beaten to death in New York City on October 7, 1979, by Constable Gus Ferris. His cousins and a few other names I don't want to give note to, they also beat Charles' friend, 16-year-old Thomas Moore of Brooklyn. Moore was critically injured but managed to get help at a nearby residence. It was Moore that identified the 4 men via a lineup 4 days after the incident. Ferris, the leader of the attack, pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter and was paroled 8 years in 1988, then murdered on November 17, 1989. On November 19, 1980, Ronald K. Crumpley, a former Transit Authority policeman, fired 40 rounds from a semi-automatic rifle and 2 Magnum pistols, all stolen from a Virginia gun shop, into a cluster of men standing in front of 2 gay bars, Ramrod and the next door Sneakers in West Greenwich Village, killing 21-year-old Jorg Wens from the Netherlands, the Ramrod's doorman, and 32-year-old Vernon Croning from Minnesota, a church organist, and wounded 6 others. Rene Malute, 23, later died of his wounds. A survivor described the shooting as a massacre, a bloodbath. Crumpley admitted to having paranoid delusions that gay men were agents of the devil, stalking him and trying to steal my soul just by looking at me. He was found not responsible by reason of insanity and committed to a maximum security Kirby Forensic Psychiatric Center on Ward's Island. In 2001, a judge denied Crumpley's request to be transferred to a less restrictive psychiatric facility. He died in 2015. It goes on. Charlie Howard was drowned in Bangor, Maine in 1984. Rebecca White was murdered on May 13, 1988, when she and her partner, Claudia Brenner, were shot by Stephen Roy Carr while hiking and camping along the Appalachian Trail. Carr later claimed that he had become enraged by the couple's lesbianism when he saw them having sex. Gordon Church was murdered on November 22, 1988, after he was kidnapped, raped, and tortured by, you heard that correctly, Michael Archuleta and Lance Wood in Millard County, Utah. Archuleta was sentenced to death for his role in the crime. Wood claimed they murdered Church because he was gay. James Zappa Lorty, a gay Vietnam War veteran, was stabbed to death. Paul Broussard, a Houston area banker, was murdered. U.S. Navy Petty Officer Alan Schindler was murdered by a shipmate who stomped him to death in public restroom in Japan on October 27, 1992. Schindler had complained repeatedly about anti-gay harassment aboard the ship. The case became synonymous with the gays in the military debate that had been brewing in the United States, culminating in Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Brandon Teena, a trans man, was raped and later murdered on December 31st, 1993, when his birth gender was revealed by police to male friends of his. The events leading to Teena's death were depicted in a movie, Boys Don't Cry. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Scott Amador was murdered on March 9, 1995, after revealing his attraction to his friend Jonathan Schmitz on an episode of The Jenny Jones Show titled Revealing Same-Sex Secret Crush. Schmitz purchased a shotgun to kill him and did so after he implied he was still attracted to him. Schmitz then turned himself into the police. I remember that reality show. Roxanne Ellis and Michelle Abdil, a lesbian couple in Medford, Oregon, was murdered on December 4, 1995, by a man who said he had no compassion for bisexual or homosexual people. Robert was convicted and sentenced to death by lethal injection. On December 5, 1997, Allie Thorney was found by the police, shot on the sidewalk in front of the housing project on East 131st Street. According to the New York Times, she was the third young transgender prostitute murdered in Harlem in 14 months. That killing has never been solved. The Other Side Lounge, a lesbian nightclub in Atlanta, was bombed by Eric Robert Rudolph, the Olympic Park bomber, on February 21st, 1997. 5 bar patrons were injured. In a statement released after he was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms for his several bombings, Rudolph called homosexuality an aberrant lifestyle. Matthew Shepard, a gay student, was fatally attacked in Laramie, Wyoming on October 7, 1998. Shepard was tortured, severely beaten, tied to a fence, and abandoned. He was found 18 hours after the attack and succumbed to his injuries less than a week later, on October 12th. His attackers, Russell Arthur Henderson and Aaron James McKinney, are both serving 2 consecutive life sentences in prison. Billy Jack Gaither was murdered by 2 acquaintances on February 19, 1999 in Alabama. The killers later admitted that they murdered Gaither because he was gay. Just because he was gay. Gary Matson and Winfield Mouter, a gay couple, were murdered on July 1st, 1999 by white supremacist brothers Matthew and Tyler Williams in Redding, California. Tyler Williams was sentenced to a minimum of 33 years in prison to be served after his completion of a 21-year sentence for firebombing synagogues and an abortion clinic. Benjamin Williams claimed that by killing the couple, he was obeying the laws of the Creator. He died by suicide in 2003 while awaiting trial. Their former pastor described the brothers as zealous in their faith, but far from kooks. This is what we're dealing with today. This is the type of Christian rhetoric. It's not Christian. It's hate. It's Christian nationalist belief. I saw this movie. You need to look it up. U.S. Army PFC Barry Winchell was murdered on July 6, 1999 in Fort Campbell, Kentucky by fellow soldier Calvin Glover. Winchell was beaten to death with a baseball bat after rumors spread on base of his relationship with transgender author Calpurnia Adams. Glover was sentenced to life in prison. Let me look that movie up. Soldier's Girl. Watch it. Soldier's Girl. Steen Fenrick was murdered in September 1999. Apparently his stepfather, John D. Fenrick, in Queens, New York. His dismembered remains were found in March 2001 with the phrase, pardon me for saying this, gay nigger number one. I don't say that word. That's a direct quote. Scrawled on his skull along with his social security number. His stepfather fled from police while being interviewed, then killed himself. Coward. Arthur Warren was punched and kicked to death by two teenage boys on July 3rd, 2000, in Grant Town, West Virginia, who reportedly believed Warren had spread a rumor that he and one of the boys, David Allen Parker, had a sexual relationship. Warren's killers ran over his body to disguise the murder as a hit and run. Parker pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison with mercy, making him eligible for parole after 15 years. His accomplice, Jared Wilson, was sentenced to 20 years. Ronald Gay entered a gay bar in Roanoke, Virginia on September 22, 2000, and opened fire on the patrons, killing Danny Overstreet, 43, and severely injuring 6 others. Ronald said he was angry over what his name now meant and deeply upset that 3 of his sons had changed their surname. He claimed that he had been told by God to find and kill lesbians and gay men, describing himself as a Christian soldier working for my Lord. Gay testified in court that he wished he could have killed more fags before several of the shooting victims, as well as Danny Overstreet's family and friends. Yep, sounds like MAGA. I know I'm butchering some of these names, and I am so sorry. Niza Morris, a trans woman, was a victim of a possible homicide in December 2002 in Philadelphia, PA. Gwen Arrojo, a trans woman, was murdered on October 4, 2002 by at least 3 men who were charged with committing a hate crime. 2 were convicted of murder, the 3rd manslaughter. However, the jury rejected the hate crime enhancement. Can you believe that? Why would you reject a hate crime? Sakia Gunn, a 15-year-old lesbian, was murdered on May 11, 2003 in Newark, New Jersey, while waiting for a bus. Gunn and her friends were propositioned by 2 men. When the girls rejected their advances, declaring themselves to be lesbians, the men attacked them. One of the men, Richard McCullough, fatally stabbed Gunn. In exchange for his pleading guilty to several lesser crimes, including aggravated manslaughter, prosecutors dropped murder charges against McCullough, who was sentenced to 20 years. Gwen Ritchie Phillips of Elizabethtown, Kentucky, was killed on June 17, 2003 by Joseph Cottrell. His body was later found in a suitcase in Rough River Lake. During his trial, 2 of Cottrell's relatives testified that he lured Phillips to his death and killed him because he was gay. Cottrell was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Nyria Johnson and Brandy Coleman were shot to death on July 23, 2003 by Paul Moore when Moore learned after a sexual encounter that Johnson was transgender. Moore then burned his victims' bodies. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to 120 years in prison. Scotty Joe Weaver was an 18-year-old murder victim from Bay Minette, Alabama, whose burned and partially decomposed body was discovered July 22, 2004, a few miles from the mobile home in which he lived. He was beaten, strangled, and stabbed numerous times, partially decapitated, and his body was doused in gasoline and set on fire. Ronnie Antonio Paris, the 3-year-old boy living in Tampa, Florida, died on January 28, 2005 due to brain injuries inflicted by his father, Ronnie Paris Jr. According to his mother and other relatives, Ronnie Paris Jr. repeatedly slammed his son into walls, slapped the child's head, and boxed him because he was concerned the child was gay and would grow up a sissy. Paris was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Jason Gage, an openly gay man, was murdered on March 11, 2005 in his Waterloo, Iowa apartment by an assailant, Joseph Lawrence, who claimed Gage had made sexual advance to him. Gage was bludgeoned to death with a bottle and stabbed in the neck, probably post-mortem with a shard of glass. Lawrence was sentenced to 50 years in prison. "18-year-old Jacob D. Rabida entered a bar on February 2, 2006 in New Bedford, Massachusetts, confirmed that it was a gay bar, and then attacked patrons with a hatchet and a handgun, wounding 3. He fatally shot himself 3 days later. Kevin Aviance, a female impressionist, musician, and fashion designer, was robbed and beaten in Manhattan on June 10, 2006, by a group of men who yelled anti-gay slurs at him. 4 assailants pleaded guilty and received prison sentences. 6 men were attacked with baseball bats and knives on July 30, 2006, after leaving the San Diego, California Gay Pride Festival. 1 victim was injured so severely that he had to undergo extensive facial reconstructive surgery. 3 men pleaded in connection with the attacks and received prison sentences. A 15-year-old juvenile also pleaded guilty. An altercation occurred in Manhattan on August 18, 2006 between a man and 7 black lesbians from Newark, New Jersey. During the altercation, the man was stabbed. The women claimed that they acted in self-defense after he screamed homophobic epithets, spit on them, and pulled one of their weaves off, while he has described the attack as a hate crime against a straight man. Michael Sandy was attacked on October 8, 2006 by 4 young heterosexual men who lured him into meeting after chatting online while they were looking for gay men to rob. He was struck by a car while trying to escape his attackers and died 5 days later without regaining consciousness. Andrew Anthos, a 17-year-old disabled gay man, was beaten with a lead pipe by a man who was shouting anti-gay names at him on February 27, 2007 in Detroit, Michigan. Anthos died 10 days later in the hospital. Sean William Kennedy, 20, was walking to his car from Brews Bar in Greenville, South Carolina on May 16, 2007, when Stephen Andrew Muller, 18 years old, got out of another car and approached Kennedy. Investigators said that Muller had made a comment about Kennedy's sexual orientation and threw a fatal punch because he didn't like the other man's sexual preference. Duana Johnson, a transsexual woman, was held down by Officer James Swain and beaten and pepper sprayed at close quarters by Officer Bridges McRae on February 12, 2008, while she was awaiting booking in the Shelby County Criminal Justice Center in Tennessee. Johnson said the officers reportedly called her faggot and she before and during the incident. On November 6, 2008, she was found dead in the street, reportedly gunned down by 3 unknowns. Yeah. Sure. Unknowns, my ass. Lawrence Larry King, a 15-year-old junior high school student, was shot twice by a classmate at E.O. Green School in Oxnard, California, February 12, 2008. He was taken off life support after doctors declared him brain dead on February 15th. According to Associated Press, prosecutors have charged a 14-year-old classmate with premeditated murder with hate crime and firearm use enhancements. Angie Zapata, an 18-year-old trans woman, was beaten to death on July 17, 2008 in Colorado, 2 days after meeting Alan Ray Andrade. The case was prosecuted as a hate crime, and Andrade was found guilty of first-degree murder on April 22, 2009. Nima Devari, 26, was attacked by a man who called him faggot on September 13, 2008, Denver, Colorado. The police that arrived on the scene refused to take a report of the attack. A Bourbonnais, I don't know how to say that town's name, Illinois elementary school bus driver was charged with leading a homophobic attack on a 10-year-old student passenger on September 15, 2008. The boy was taunted by the driver, who then encouraged other students to chase and beat the child. Letitia Green, a 22-year-old transgender woman, was shot and killed by Dwight DeLee on November 14, 2008 in Syracuse, New York, because he thought she was gay. Local news media reported the incident with her legal name, Moses Tisha Cannon. DeLee was convicted of first-degree manslaughter as a hate crime on July 17, 2009, and received the maximum sentence of 25 years in state prison. This was only the second time in the nation's history that a person was prosecuted for a hate crime against a transgender person, and the first hate crime conviction in New York State. Good. You know, there are some that believe you should remove hate crimes. You know who those people are? MAGA. Republicans. Carl Joseph Walker Hoover, an 11-year-old child in Springfield, Massachusetts, hanged himself with an extension cord on April 6, 2009 after being bullied all school year by peers who said he acted feminine and was gay. Justin Goodwin, 36, of Salem, Massachusetts, was attacked and beaten on April 10, 2009 by as many as 6 people outside a bar in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Goodwin suffered a shattered jaw, broken eye socket, broken nose, and broken cheekbone. Goodwin later died by suicide. Seaman August Provost was found shot to death and his body burned at his guard post on Camp Pendleton on June 30, 2009. LGBT community leaders, citing military sources, initially said that Provost's death was a hate crime. Provost had been harassed because of his sexual orientation. Military leaders have since explained whatever the investigation concludes, the military's don't ask, don't tell policy prevented Provost from seeking help. Family and friends believe he was murdered because he was openly gay or bisexual, according to some family and sources. The killer died by suicide a week later after admitting the murder. The Navy has not concluded if this was a hate crime. Navy, you need to do so. You really do. C.C. McDonald, a young African-American trans woman, was attacked outside a tavern shortly after midnight on June 5, 2011, in Minneapolis, Minnesota. C.C. fatally stabbed her attacker with a pair of scissors. She was subsequently convicted of manslaughter and jailed for 19 months in a men's prison. How awful. Mark Carson, a 32-year-old gay man, was shot to death by a man who trailed and taunted him and a friend as they walked down the street in Greenwich Village, New York, yelling anti-gay slurs and asking one of them, "You want to die tonight?" Elliot Morales was arrested shortly after the shooting and charged with murder and weapons charges on May 19, 2013. In March 2014, John Patrick Masterson, an openly gay rapper professionally known as Gypsta, was attacked in a New York City subway station as he and his partner were celebrating their 10-year anniversary. The assailant began calling the couple homophobic slurs. Following a verbal disagreement, Gypsta was beaten by the unidentified subject, resulting in multiple fractures to his face. As a result of the incident, Gypsta required surgery due to 7 broken bones sustained to his nose and eye socket, which forced him to cease promotion of his second album, Turned Up. 49 people were killed and 53 injured in a shooting at an Orlando gay nightclub on June 12, 2016. Mulasha Booker, an African-American transgender woman, was murdered on May 18, 2019, 1 month after she had been severely beaten by a mob of men following a minor traffic incident. The April 12th beating in Dallas garnered national attention as it had been recorded and posted on social media. Kylan Schultz and Crystal Turner, an American married lesbian couple, was murdered on August 12, 2021 by a man named Adam Pinkswicks, who later committed suicide before it was discovered that he was the killer. 5 people were killed and 25 injured in a shooting at a Colorado gay nightclub on November 19th, 20th, 2022. On July 29th, 2023, O'Shea Sibley, a 28-year-old gay man, was stabbed and later died outside a gas station in Brooklyn, New York. The suspect responsible for the stabbing was identified as a 17-year-old who turned himself into police custody on August 4th, 2023, was later charged with second-degree murder as a hate crime. February 7th, 2024, Nex Benedict, an openly non-binary 16-year-old, was attacked in a school bathroom. They died the following day. That's where we live. Vote blue. Vote blue.